Real numbers. Real numbers are rational numbers, integers, whole numbers, and natural numbers. They're also irrational numbers. So a natural number are those numbers that you learn automatically when you are little. You start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are your counting numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Whole numbers are also the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 0 is also included in whole numbers. So whole numbers is everything inside of this whole number box. 0 and all of your natural numbers. Integers. Integers are the numbers on the other side of 0 on the number line. Those are your negative numbers. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. But integers are also 0 and all of your natural numbers. So integers includes everything that's inside the integer box, whole numbers and natural numbers. Rational numbers. Rational numbers are those numbers that come in between your integers. Those are your fractions and your decimals. 23 hundredths, 1/2. And then we have your irrational numbers. Irrational numbers are those numbers that ramble on and on and on and on and on and just don't seem to make sense. We have some irrational people in the world who ramble on and on and on and on and on and don't make sense. So those are your irrational numbers. For instance, pi, and the square root of 21. Those would be irrational numbers that continue on forever, but there's no pattern to them. Rational numbers can repeat themselves, but there's a pattern. You know what's going to come next. Those are rational people. You know what's going to come next. There's a pattern. They're pretty rational, pretty predictable. Okay, so let's look up here on the number line for a minute, and let's talk about our main focus today, which is integers. Integers are everything that's inside of this box, and this box. These are all of our integers. And integers are also everything that we find right here on this number line. Positive numbers, 0, and our negative numbers are our integers. So, rational numbers can be found in between our whole numbers here, and irrational numbers can also be found in between these whole numbers. But your integers are always going to come in the form of a whole number or a negative whole number. Let's first define opposites because it will help us better understand the definition of integers. Opposites. Two numbers that are the same distance from 0 on opposite sides of the number line. For instance, I'm going to graph the number 1 and the number -1. Those are opposite numbers. They're the same distance away from 0 on the other side of the number line. So now let's go back up to integers and define integers. Integers are whole numbers and their opposites. So any whole number and that whole number's opposite. -1, -2, -3. There's the opposite of 1, -1. Opposite of 2 is -2. The opposite of 3 is -3. Well, what about 0? 0 is neither positive nor negative. It is a whole number, but 0 is neither a positive number or a negative number. It doesn't have an opposite to it because there's not a negative version of it. Or an absolute value. Absolute value is a number's distance from 0. For example, -5. So let's find -5, which is right here. I'm going to graph it just by putting a dot. And when I say graph, I just mean put a dot over it. And I'm going to count how far away it is from 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. It is 5 jumps away from 0. And so the absolute value of -5 equals 5. All right, let's get real. Why in the world would you ever use integers? Well, we use integers all the time when we're telling what the temperature is outside. If it's below 0, we know it's extremely cold, and if it's above 0, if we're talking about degrees Fahrenheit, 30 above, still cold. If it's 70, 80 degrees, pretty warm. So we use positive and negatives in temperature. Let's look right here. We have a little parachute guy who's way up in the air. It looks like he's about 500 feet in the air. And we have a boat that is at sea level, and it's floating on the ocean. And then we have a shark that's below the ocean. He's about 300 feet below the ocean. And so we also use integers on a vertical number line, here with temperature, and here with telling the distance under the water the shark is, how far in the air our parachute man is. Let's look down here at some other numbers. Also, let's think of money. When you think of money, we think of positives and negatives, because a lot of times when we spend too much, we end up in the negative. And when we save, we have a positive dollar amount. All right, which ones of these numbers would you say is an integer? Is 7 an integer? It is, because it's a positive whole number. 4/5. 4/5 would not be an integer because it is a fraction, and fractions are rational numbers. Rational numbers do not fit in the integer category. -6 is an integer. It's the opposite of a whole number, which would be 6. 2,000 is an integer. -9, the absolute value of -9. Well, the absolute value of -9, or its distance from 0, is 9. So really what I'm asking is 9 an integer? And yes, it is. And 2 and 1300ths, would that be an integer? Well, it's a decimal number, so that would fit into a rational number, and therefore it would not be an integer. So no.